What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 6 of the A to Z series. And today we're going to be talking about Kano, Dracai of Aether. And today I brought the one and only Peter Buddensiek. And welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, explain how you became so well rounded with this hero specifically. I know most consider you at least in the top 5, maybe top 2, maybe the best Kano in the game. And you're just been playing this hero for quite some time. So give us a little introduction about yourself, the team, whatever you want. Go for it.
Yeah, so obviously my name is Peter Buddensiek, and I started playing Kano a very long time ago, probably over 2.5 years now. I first started playing Kano in the Blitz format before Aether Wildfire was even printed. So like way back then, before Everfest, I was playing Kano in Blitz because I thought it was just cool, thought it was something different, and really like kind of like spells decks in a lot of games as well, and started playing it in CC not too long after. Obviously, was playing it in CC leading up to Pro Tour One, but decided not to play it at Pro Tour One, and then saw the accomplishments that obviously the Arsenal Pass guys did at PT One with Kano and Alex Four, and decided, hey, I want to play that character way more exclusively, and decided to play it pretty much almost at every event. I think I haven't played it at 2 events since since like PT1 at major events. So, yeah, I've been playing the hero for a very long time. Uh, have topped a battle hardened in all three formats with Kano in 1-1 in Blitz, topped the LL1, the second battle hardened, and also topped many events with Kano, invitationals and other stuff, and made very deep runs and callings with Kano as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And so uh, you're also on a team, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on Team MetalFABTokens. I'm
Okay.
on with a couple other notable people. One of them being Caleb or Majin Bay, who is also another iconic Kano or Wizard player as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's go ahead and kind of introduce the hero just as a whole. What is Kano trying to accomplish? What are some of uh the style of the deck is the best way. So obviously we have the combo aspect of Kano that revolves around Aether Wildfire. You just want to kind of walk through the base premise of the deck, what he is trying to accomplish, and what are some of the ways that he does kind of follow through with that.
Yeah. So the base thing about Kano is that you're trying to set up a combo of Aether Wildfire and Blazing Aether with either one or multiple spells in between those two to be able to do enough damage to kill your opponent at the end of the game. Some other like things during the game is setting up, energy potions, potions of deja vu, and chipping your opponents down with other red spells or other yellow spells in your deck, or using Tome of Aetherwind or Tome of Fiendel to dig to those combo pieces, or using those tomes during your combo as well. That's their main strategy, is to try to combo at the end of the game. A lot of the times you want to spell one or two times on your opponent's turn, and then be able, when they're at low AB, when they attack you, to then respond on their turn, kind of taking 2 turns in one turn cycle to finish them off at the end of the game.
Makes perfect sense. So we're definitely going to classify him as a combo deck in the way that he is mainly played currently, basically. And also, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of dig into the deck list. And so I got that pulled up. The equipment looks somewhat standard. I will say there is one kind of outlier. Of course, Storm Striders exist, right? And then we have Crucible to get the pump, and then Metacarpus and Ragamuffins have been staples for quite some time. However, Spellfire Cloak, we've seen it in the meta, but it's been a while since we've seen it as like the go-to piece. So what's the explanation on that card specifically?
Yeah, so Spellrack Cloak used to be one of the, basically before Kindle and this last set came out. We used to play Threadboard Tunic. Spellfire Cloak was the original one, and then I topped a event with Threadboard Tunic in my sideboard as like kind of a meme card. but then we actually tested post and realized that Thermo Tunic was better than Spellfire Cloak at the time. But the reason why we play Spellfire Cloak now is because in a lot of these aggro matchups, you need to have. Sometimes you don't live 3 turns, or you need to be able to combo in the first or second turn of the game. And Spellfire Cloak allows you to get that resource at any time that you want, unlike Tunic, to where you have to live that three turns and then use it on the fourth turn, maybe, or like get that value. Tunic's more of a late game value card, giving you more multiple resources throughout the game. Spellfire Cloak is immediate. I'm just going to give you one resource. I don't block anything, but I'm going to give you that resource, and you can activate that resource on turn 1 or 2 turn of the game if you really, really need it. Spellfire Cloak is the choice over the Tunic currently because of a card that was just printed called Kindle, and the lines with Kindle sometimes get super complicated, and you don't have a lot of time to go to 0 cards in your hand to activate Third Tunic. Sometimes you need that resource to get those cards out of your hand so you don't have any cards in your hand for Kindle. So the Spellfire Cloak is a lot less situational and gives you a lot more options to get that resource.
Right. Makes perfect sense. And then going into the actual cards in the deck, we have what 33 blues. I assume that what probably 27-ish are just kind of like your mid card combo situation where it's just the cheap 0 cost that you can play off the top for little additional resources. Is that, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, yeah. Most lists play about like 30 to 34 blues. I think 33 is the sweet number that I always like playing at this time. 33 is, I think, the statistically correct version. And then usually there's 27 cards that are also like basically your damage spells or everything that is not a blue in your deck. But a lot of them are taken because you have to play very specific cards always, like Aether, Wildfire, Blazing, and all 6 tomes. So realistically, if you take those if you take those 12 cards out, you really have 15 cards going in and out of your deck in certain matchups to be able to kind of get damage done and chip your opponent or combo them at the end of the game.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. So just so everybody can kind of understand, referring to both tomes and maybe even like Gaze the Ages and, explain a couple situations or kind of the significance of drawing cards with Kano, because I think that that's one thing that's kind of often overlooked when players kind of go into playing Kano is, if a hero like Victor draws a couple cards, like it doesn't, they don't understand the scaling basically. Whereas Kano, I mean, drawing an extra card can, I don't want to use the word infinite, but it can literally, it can exponentially grow your damage output by a large margin. And so just kind of walk us through the importance of drawing cards in Kano specifically.
Yeah, drawing cards in Kano is probably the hero that drawing the most cards matters the most. If that kind of makes sense. Uh, Tomes allow you to extend your combo and also allows you to get to your combo earlier in the game. A lot of the misconceptions about Kano is like, oh, you sideboard the tomes out if they're not good. They only block for 2 sometimes, and sometimes you don't have enough time to like cast them on your own turn. But realistically, they're insane hits to hit off the top of your library and extend the chain. Gaze the Ages is obviously the best blue in the deck as well. Being able to, if you've played another wizard non-attack action, it also bounces back to your hand. So if you hit it off the top, you can actually cast another spell and then in response cast Gaze the Ages to opt to, and then it bounces to your hand. And then you can also use it to resources if you want to activate Kano again or pay for other spells down the line after you've kind of sifted and opted to. Drawing cards, because Aether Wildfire does multiplicable damage, the more resources you have, the more damage you can do and the more spells you can cast in the same turn, and that will all get amplified by Aether Wildfire. So if you give Kano enough time to be able to set up a lot of these tomes, like if he stacks his entire deck and has multiple tomes after there, he can do like 28 million damage is actually a number that Kano can technically do if you give him enough time, right?
Mm.
But realistically, you can do hundreds, thousands of damage in a normal game if you really wanted to, if you give Kano enough time to draw and hit all those tomes on the same turn.
Right. Makes perfect sense. And so, as far as what we would consider, so the Kano activation, the hero ability,
Mhm.
basically says any, it's just any non-attack off the top, right?
Yeah.
You get to banish it and then play it that turn as an instant. So, as far as whiffs in the deck, just specifically referring to the main deck, the main 60. All I see here are the Kindles and the Eye of Ophidia. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. You play
Yeah,
4
yeah.
whiffs in the deck.
Yep, 4 whiffs. So if you hit those on the top, it doesn't feel the best, but I think that that's an okay opportunity cost paid. Now I have heard some situations where people kind of side out the Eye of Ophidia if they think that the game's going very short. I remember hearing something about that where the opportunity cost may be a little bit high because you don't really have the agency on how long you get to establish your combo, right? So running Eye of Ophidia can kind of, I don't know, just brick you when you really have to take your shot. What's your stance on that in that specific situation?
Yeah, I heard that argument a lot before Kindle was printed when it was just the one whiff in your deck was Eye of Ophidia, and it felt so
Right.
bad if you needed to spell off the top and you hit Eye. But the problem and the argument that I will always make is that Eye of Ophidia is kind of if like euphoric or like it feels so good when you hit it off when you have it in your hand and you need to hit off the top. It allows you the safe coming with that op to allowing you to do all these crazy combos because you know more information, you know what's on top. You might not even go for the combo because of the cards that you see on top, and you're like, oh, I can't go for it now because of these cards, and you get to kind of sift through your deck. It is worth. Yes, you can if you need to hit, spell to combo on the end turn, it will almost lose you the game sometimes. But I do think you gain so much more percentage points being able to run the deck, and every single time that you pitch it, it is incredible, incredible edge every single time you get to have the activated ability. So I'm always a component of running Ibophidia than not running Ibophidia, and you just got to take the chances of not hitting, a 1 in 60 in your deck, right?
It sounds like the power is worth the opportunity cost to me. So another inclusion that is kind of unique on a recent basis would be Cindering Foresight. What is the thought process of the one of in the deck, and kind of what does that card help you accomplish?
Yeah, so this is actually an oldie that has come back as well. This used to be a card that you ran way back in the day during crew. This was a card that when you didn't have a lot of the new come of cards from Everfest that used to run all the time because it would sift through your deck. Something with Cindering Foresight is really good now is because you're trying to set up these huge combo turns. If you have actually an E-Pot out on the field already, and then you want to combo and you have a Cindering Foresight in your hand, technically Cindering Foresight with an E-Pot is better than a regular blue because of the information that you get, as well as amplifying the first damage of an Aether Wildfire or whatever spell first. Also, in the early game, Considering Foresight is really good at finding your potions. A lot of the time, if you go uh, on turn 0, I do like just to hard cast my Sindering Foresight from my and then my hand and just try to sift for an E-Pod on turn 0 as well. But it's Sindering Foresight is really just trying to get information off the top of the library to make it so that the cards align in the situation that you need it to align in. There's a lot of nuance in trying to get, needing to hit a red first and then drawing a blue and then hitting a red. And Sindering Foresight, extremely, extremely good at doing that and allowing you to hit the right cards when you need it and draw the right cards when you need it as well.
All right. And also, we have Aether Flare, specifically referring to the red one, which I think is just a tempo monster. That card is actually, to me, what scares me the most in the matchup. If you're an aggressive leaning deck, I think that is probably one of the scariest cards, because if the Kano accesses it at the right time, you can basically just accidentally win the game, depending on what the following cards are on the top of your deck. And along with Aether Spindle, I think those two just have so much power attached to them, because you have the op setup or the amplification damage without the requirement of it being on your opponent's turn like Wildfire does. And then everybody knows Blazing Aether, right? That is your combo closer, or not a closer if you have more than one, which is always nice when that happens. It happened at me at Nats. I got double blazinged, and it happens. But let's spend a minute on Kindle. I think Kindle is a unique enough card, and maybe not as familiar to a lot of players. I mean, everybody's seen Wildfire, everybody knows what it does. But Kindle, I want to talk about kind of what it does to the deck. What does it allow you to do that it didn't allow you to before? And I also want to dig into kind of what are some of those intricate lines. Give me a couple examples on like what makes it a very difficult card to play, because that's one of the main things I've heard is it does add another level of complexity to the deck.
Yeah, so Kindle is obviously the newest card added to Kano, came out in the expansion slot of Part the Mistveil. And this is one of those cards to where my good friend Caleb actually spoiled this card, and when he spoiled it, he hopped in our Discord and asked me if I thought this card was powerful, and I said I thought this card was good, but you had to fundamentally change how the deck worked or how you play Kano as a whole to make it work. And it took about 2 weeks for us to really like come up with an idea for Kindle, and this is, what the actual every single Kindle player basically plays this kind of a list now because of Kindle coming through. So it fundamentally changed the deck when it came out on how you play it, but it's also probably the hardest card in the entire deck to play correctly, and the hardest card to think about correctly as well. This is the most not like most messed up lines that you can do in Kano of getting it wrong always start or end with a Kindle, I would say. Which means a lot of things, and I'll get into that in a bit. But what Kindle allows you to do that you didn't have before is that usually the max thing that you could do with Wildfire combo is coming in for Wildfire for 6 and then having a spell in between, 1 or 2 spells in between, and then coming with Blazing. But you get capped on a lot of the damage that you could do. The sweet number was about like 26 to 36, was somewhere in that range was the max amount of damage that you can do. With Kindle, now this is where you can really pod race and really, really get into those incredible numbers. And fight through AB3 a lot more efficiently than you used to be able to do. If you're basing off the numbers, Aether Wildfire hitting for 3 versus 6 is just upwards of 12 plus damage. But making Wildfire hit for 4 instead of 3 is also an incredible amount of damage you're gaining. So what Kindle allows you to do is to be pumping Aether Wildfire efficiently while you're still doing your regular combo, but it adds a little bit more variance to the deck for that price of the power, right? Something with Kano is that you can only hit non-attack actions at the top. Kindle is an instant, so it is another brick to your deck. So you went from 1 brick in your deck to 4 bricks in your deck, but the power of Kindle is so much there. It has the new keyword that is going to be the base keyword for the next set of wizards is amp. Amp. This is amp 1, so it's just going to give +1, basically the first spell that does damage, which is also very unique because you can amp works retroactively instead of progressively. So Crucible, the next thing that you would do arcane damage, it would get +1. But Kindle, you can play at the end, and then the first thing that would deal damage this turn would get the additional +1. So say that your opponent, you cast this, you have Kindle already resolved, and then you come in with a spell. If your opponent wanted to respond with, say, a ward aura, then you came in with another spell, the amp would actually go to that second spell that you casted in response to that ward. So it kind of happens all at once. Kindle will always resolve with the first thing that resolves for that wants to do damage that turn, which is very good for Aether Wildfire because Wildfire is always the first spell that we want to hit for turn, so that every other spell gets amplified as well. The second line of text on Kindle says if you have no cards in your hand, you draw a card, which, as I talked about earlier, drawing a card with Kano is just incredible. Something that Kindle says basically is if your next thing gets +1 and you get to redraw whatever card in your hand what Kindle would have been, right? But everything that first thing that next turn gets +1. What that means is that you can set up your library with like Cindering Foresight and opt with Eye of Ophidia and know exactly what card you're going to hit off the draw with Kindle, which is the most important thing recently and why Cindering Foresight has come back. Is that sometimes you need that Kindle to draw blue so you can pay for everything because Kindle is usually one of the last spells that you cast before you go off. And or while you're going off. So you sometimes you need to get that blue to pay for more, or sometimes you need Kindle actually to hit a red so you can put it off on back on top of the library with Ragmuffin's hat or play it with Storm Striders or something like that as well. Um, Kindle allows you to have multiple lines. The old line that you wanted to do with Kano was just wildfire into another spell into blazing. But with Kindle allows you to do is one Kindle pretty decently easy to play. Just always make sure that you can do it with no cards in your hand. Hit the Kindle off the top. Well, play the Kindle from your hand, draw the card, and either pay for the rest of your spells, or it is the red card that you can put back on top with Ragamuffins, like I said. But what it gets really spicy is when you have multiple copies of Kindle, because that's when you really have to make a lot of micro decisions in the game to get that extra +2 or +3 because of how you have to sequence it correctly.
Makes perfect sense. And one of the things that really impressed me about the card, it was the first time I ever saw one played out of Arsenal.
Mhm.
And that just by far kind of like opened my mind a little bit. And I was like, you know what? Anytime you play a combo deck, anytime you have flexibility in what card you arsenal, it's astronomically valuable. A good example of that is like back in the day when Viscera did his combo thing, right? Become the Arc Knight. The fact that it just gave you an extra card that you could just lean on to go grab whatever you needed when you needed it, it was so valuable. So now you have the ability to arsenal that Kindle and then still have the ability to do your combo without actually waiting for the wildfire. It just gives you another piece to kind of uh, put into the bag, and then up we're ready to go. So that was one of the things that I was really impressed about the card, and it is, I think, put that card alone has probably put Kano in probably 2 tiers above where he used to be before the card came out, at least. So he's in a really good spot right now. One thing that I also wanted to mention was I see Lessons in Lava. That's an old staple. I think a lot of people are very familiar with it, but I don't see Sonic Boom. Why is that?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Lesson in Lava, obviously, still a powerhouse that it always was. And actually gained a new tool with Kindle because you actually can search Kindle off of Lesson in Lava as well. So a lot of times you can just come in for 4, and if you say already have like Aether Wildfire in your arsenal, a lot of the time you just grab another lesson, or you would grab Blazing to try to combo the following turn. Actually, now you want to grab Kindle because grabbing Kindle allows you to do more damage with Aether Wildfire and allow you to do even more combos and different increases throughout the deck. But Lesson being able to tutor anything at the top of the library is extremely powerful, especially when your hero ability is to play the top card of your library a majority of the time. We don't see Sonic Boom anymore or as much. Some people still play it, but we don't see it as much because of Kindle specifically. Because Kindle is another one of those bricks in the deck. The Sonic Boom, you come in and it's always random what you're going to hit off the top. You don't really know unless you've already opted before. And if you cast Sonic Boom and hit Kindle off the top, you're losing a lot of the value that Sonic Boom had originally, which is hedged a little bit with being able to play Cindering Foresight now in the main board. But you're going through too many steps to try to make Sonic Boom work instead of really focusing on what the real power of the deck is and have that consistency in the deck.
Makes perfect sense. And so the Lessons in Lava, I remember back, it used to be a major skill check when kind of like they would just crucible and then throw the lessons out. And then basically Kano would have like pretty much an empty hand and people would panic and start pitching to AB. I remember that being like a major skill check on people over respecting Lessons in Lava in that situation because 90% of the time the Kano player is just going to go grab a blue so they draw an extra blue next turn guaranteed. So it's not like they're not going and getting like this major piece that they're going to kill you with that turn most of the time. But nowadays, I mean, you can go grab Kindle, right? And
Yeah.
it just gets really scary, and it's no so you actually have to respect it somewhat in that spot because, them just getting access to Kindle can be really scary because it's, if it's in their hand, it's not on the top of their deck. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, Lesson is just one of those cards that just keeps the deck humming, keeps the deck going, getting the best piece the next turn, as well, or either on the turn that you're playing currently or the next turn is just incredible to do. I wish it could get any non-attack action. I could put Epod on the top of my deck, but I think that would be way too good,
Yeah,
if you could. But yeah, no, Lesson getting Kindle is one of the most important parts of the deck now as well.
absolutely. So let's go ahead and move down into the sideboard. There's obviously a couple, and then directly after, we'll kind of get into kind of like what we're going to be utilizing stuff into. But obviously, I see a defensive package, Fate for Scene, Oasis, and Sink Below. I'm assuming that that's for the stacking plan. Do you kind of want to go over just what the stacking plan is and what you're trying to accomplish by doing it, and how do you leverage these cards to help accomplish that?
Yeah, so the stacking plan actually was created by somebody called Julian. Many people know, he's one of the probably the best Kano players. Well, I would say the best stacking Kano player in the world, and also just one of the best Kano players in the world as well. But what he came up with, and had an insane amount of spreadsheets and other stuff on it, was talking about the stacking Kano plan, which used to be something that you did really old into Flesh of Blood, like way back in the day, used to try to stack to second cycle with Kano when the meta was a lot slower. But it really came out because of heavy hitters, and the specific decks that came out in there, to where these defensive reactions and playing actually a slower game plan and only pitching specific cards to the bottom of your library to hit it into a specific order so that you can just kill your opponent on one turn without doing damage basically the entire other part of the game as well, was super super not nuanced, but like very new to a lot of players. And this allows you to do it to where if your opponent is playing like AB2 and maybe has a couple Oasis in their deck, it makes it so that your combo will always kill them and will always have a better late game than whatever deck that you're playing against, because they will eventually die to it basically 90 to 100% of the time if you remember the stack correctly, which is also part of part of the nuance and the skill curve of Kano, is being able to remember upwards of 20 cards in a row correctly to be able to combo at one point while you're stacking and playing the game of Flesh and Blood as well. This allows you to certain matchups like Axis Dory, Kasai, Victor, and New are like the main ones that you are doing this pure stacking game plan against, to basically make it the matchup almost above a 90% for you as Kano, because they don't pressure you enough to be able to kill you a lot of the time when you have these defensive tools to allow yourself to live that long. And they have nothing to do to stop the combo besides Oasis, but you can win through triple Oasis if you stack correctly, which a lot of the decks don't even play that many Oasis. But just trying to for sure get a win on a matchup that could be sometimes dicey if you don't hit the correct spots in enough time.
Right, right. And if I'm not mistaken, kind of the old method of attacking that strategy of like high AB counts was kind of like your big 2 for 5s, like Swell Tidings and stuff like that, and just kind of push over the top a little bit, chip them down, and then kind of ramp up at the end. So this seems like like you said, I mean, taking certain matchups to a 90% win rate, just because you have so much agency over what's happening. It seems it seems pretty good. Now, stacking, that's the difficult part of the deck, right? That's probably the aspect that a lot of people have that struggle the most with, right?
Yeah, I would say both the tempo plan and the stacking plan have basically different complexities to it. And both are, I want to say, around the same, like hard to play like statistically as well on both sides. But the stacking plan is way more memorization. then being able to run the statistics of like what percentage you're going to hit off the top and when to go for it and when not to. Um, if you're obviously not good at memorization, which a decent amount of people are not good at, a strategy was created or came into the light of the Fleshbot community called the Mind Palace, which Julian wrote a extremely good article about that you can find online. He does it to where you're using this Mind Palace technique of putting different cards into different areas of a house and basically walking through the house and figuring out where they are. So every house has about 4 cards in it, and one's maybe on the sink, one's in the shower, one's on the bed, one's on the couch or something like that. And you give them like a little pizzazz, right? Like Fate Foreseen, you're pondering the orb, sink below, you're in the middle of the ocean, right? Giving it a little flavor. And what this Mind Palace allows you to do is remember all these cards while being able to talk to your opponent at the same time. Because you have to stack in a very specific way, like pitching a tome, putting 2 blues under it, then pitching red, 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 that wildfire, wildfire blazing, and then you have a tome under it with double blue. When you're playing a real game, it is very hard to remember a specific order of cards all the time. What this Mind Palace allows you to do is kind of sectioning your brain to remember it correctly and kind of almost go through a house and remember it all the time so you can hit it and remember in a specific order. That is a lot of words and a lot of like, kind of complexity, but it allows you to, cast triple wildfire on the same turn, cast triple blazing on the same turn, and draw, upwards of 6 to 12 cards on the same turn, which is an incredible feat to do in Flesh and Blood as well, but takes a lot of time, takes a lot of planning, and takes a lot of complexity to do. But it allows you to get these super high total of 90% win rates, but that 10% of margin of error is not on your opponent, it's actually on yourself because of how taxing it is to be able to remember that many things and play perfectly that you need to do for the stacking plan.
Right, and then before anybody, like, does some gold fishing and like, "Oh, I got it down. I did the perfect stack," and they'll do it, like, 10 times or whatever. It's a little bit different in a tournament when you're
Mm.
playing, 7 to 8 rounds a day, and now certain metas are more forgiving than others. I would say probably this meta is a good example of that, to where you're probably stacking less games than you're not stacking. And, you know, so just be aware to any newer player, of the mental fatigue that comes along with just because you learn the Mind Palace and you can do the stack while goldfishing or whatever the case may be, or on Talishar. It's a little bit different in a tournament, a little bit more focus, and get the reps in that mental fortitude to kind of make it through the day because it can get you.
I think the actual hardest part about stacking is having to actually talk to your opponent while you're remembering all these cards. Like the level 1 of stacking is being able to goldfish and do it to a high enough percentage of you remembering those cards. But the level 2 of the stacking part is you also have to interact with your opponent. You also have to talk and pass priority and go to attacks and blocks and be able to hold a conversation a lot of the time. And can you remember? It's remembering all those cards in that specific order, but also talking to your opponent at the same time because you can't just go fully mute on them. That's just not something that you can do in a game of Flesh and Blood. You do have to talk to them. So being able to remember it and talk to them is the true hardest part of stacking, because you will forget your stack a decent amount of time.
That's actually really interesting because I'm the type of player that loves to talk and I love to like engage in banter and stuff like
Same.
that. So I had no idea that I was actually gaining somewhat of an advantage by just chatting with my Kano players.
100% you get an
Uh,
advantage.
yeah. So that's your best tip here is if you're playing against Kano, just talk to them, mess up their math.
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay, so finishing out the sideboard, let's talk about the one copy of Aether Quickening and then the 3 Wounded Bulls.
Yeah, so the one copy of Aether Quickening is in there for to actually take out Cindering Foresight specifically. That Cindering Foresight, adds a lot of not it takes a lot of the variance out of your matchups where you want to purely stack, but some matchups you are not trying to play to combo somebody. You're trying to block them a little bit more heavily, not trying to go all in. Maybe the combo is not as good in that matchup than others, and that's where Aether Quickening comes in, to being that perfect one-for-one switch to give you that extra kind of umph of chipping your opponent and coming in with a red damage. Also, specifically, uh, Cindering is not good against Enigma, which a quickening, Aether Quickening is good against Enigma because it has the 4 breakpoint to be able to get over that AB3 and kill some of their wards. Also, speaking about Enigma, Wounded Bull is actually an old tech that I came up with to try to beat Icelander back in the day when Icelander was legal for Kano, and try to be the better Wounded Bull deck as Kano into Icelander. But it's come back now to have another instance of being it very cool tech to play against an illusionist. Winnable is good because a lot of the time they do play, cards that have phantasm, so you can pop it as well. But the real thing about Winnable is understanding how turn cycles work in the game, and especially with Kano, is because you can play on both sides, both turns. So on my turn, if I come in with Winnable for 8, my opponent has to give me 2 to 3 cards to be able to block the full 8 to keep Enigma's wards and board state in there. But what that allows me to do if they give me 2 to 3 cards is then on their turn I can go and they come in with an aura and I come in, activate Kano, and then play spells at the top and kind of make it so you come in 2 turns and you maybe 1 turn you have off, and you come in with Woundable and play on their turn, take a turn off, and really be able to clear their board efficiently and never fall behind. Because the second that you fall behind versus Enigma, we all know that you get locked out of the game and you never do
Yep.
another point of damage versus them. This is just another way of clearing their board and staying ahead or staying in parity to never fall behind.
And speaking of clearing board, Scour is a great resource to do that as well, which is obviously has a one of copy in the sideboard. So let's talk about the sideboard equipment. We obviously have Constellus, which is probably for the mirror. Is there any other matchup where it would typically come in?
No, it's just for the mirror.
Just the mirror. And then Waning Moon comes in for the mirror, if I'm not mistaken. Also Enigma in
Yeah,
Prism.
so the mirror and then the illusionist. A lot of
Mhm.
the time versus the illusionist, you don't really need the additional +1 that Crucible gives. You are trying to, instead of trying to get that one breakpoint, which Enigma, if they AB3 and then one of their ward things will die, you're actually trying to go wide with your damage and make it so they have to pitch additional cards to stop all of your damage if they want to keep their board, or go over the amount of AB that they have in their hand to be able to kill multiple things in the same turn, which a Waiting Moon allows you to do because it does 3 damage in your opponent's turn. So if you have a 4 plus a 3, that's 7 points of damage, which if your opponent has 2 cards in their hand, and even if they're both blue, they can only pitch for 6, and you're doing 7 damage, which is less, and you can get to clear their board and chip them as well.
Sounds good. And then Tunic.
And Tunic is for when you're stacking. Tunic is really good as well because uh you're gonna get that energy counter eventually through the game, and sometimes you actually are going to block for one on a specific breakpoint to keep you alive to that end point. But anytime you're gonna play in a matchup like Enigma or maybe a Victor or something like that, where the game is gonna go long, you're gonna go 9, 12 turns, and you can get multiple instances of that resource from Tunic. Just incredible. A little bit better if you don't have to go off immediately to get that spell word, that spellfire cloak, and you get more value.
Sounds good. All right, so that's going to pretty much cover the deck list. Now, the next thing that I really wanted to touch on was kind of the matchup side of things. And I don't want to take this from like a hero perspective. There is one that I'm interested in just kind of knowing myself. I think a lot of other people are going to have questions about that matchup specifically. We'll get to it after in case it kind of changes the conception. But we kind of want to split this into like low AB count, high AB count, and then like a mixture of like AB spell void. So we'll start with the matchups where you think that they will present little AB.
Yeah, so if you're doing the little AB or they're more of an aggro deck, that's where the combo is really really good because usually if they only have AB1, you're gonna do a significant amount of damage with Aether Wildfire. It's always going to hit for upwards of like 5+ damage and allows you to have these really really good 30+ damage turns to kill your opponent on their turn because they're just not able to pitch to stop it. They take a lot of damage if you keep it with the Aether Flare on your own turn, coming with another spell. There's not a lot. They just don't have the AB to protect themselves with that. So you can just try to race them with that Spellfire Cloak and get it at them.
Makes sense. And then what about like a full AB package, something of like the order of AB3, maybe even I've seen in a lot of cases AB4.
Yeah, so if you're playing against people that have EB3, it depends on what style of deck that they're playing, right? If they're playing like Zen, for example, plays AB3 plus Spellvoid 1, you're still trying to go for that combo. But if you're playing against people that have high AB, but they also maybe have Oasis and stuff like that, like something like a New or like a Victor, this is where we come in with like a stacking package, right? So we play these 52 cards. So we're gonna take out that Cindering Foresight. We're going to take out those Kindles. We're going to take out those copies of Aether Quickening as well. And then we're going to and then those Potion of Deja Vus that also do not block. And then we're going to put in, those Sink Belows, those Fate for Scenes, and that Oasis, and sometimes even that Scour or keep it in a Quickening to get back to that 60, depending on the matchup. But this doesn't allow you to basically maximize the amount of cards in your deck that block and get only really keep in the cards that you want to put in the stack, right? Like, so I'm either in a block with every single card, like the Sink Belows, the Fates, and the block threes, or I'm trying to pitch them to the bottom, like my Tomes, my Wildfires, and my Blazings, and my Red Flares, to then eventually kill my opponent in that basically Giga stack on the bottom.
Yep. And just so people know, you can, if you block with say 3 cards, if it's a red card, you can just activate your Crucible for
Yep.
basically no effect, and just as a way to get that into the pitch zone. If it's a blue, you can activate Kano for free and just take a gander, just whatever the case may be. So, absolutely. And then let's talk about, I guess I want to say a mixture, but mainly just interacting with Spell Void. When somebody brings Spell Void, how does that change? Because obviously, if they're bringing Spell Void, they want a quicker game, and it kind of your counter to, as the Kano player, to a quicker game is getting the combo, and Spell Void does kind of counter that a little bit. So does anything change, or are you just trying to outvalue the Spell Void?
Yeah, most of the time versus Spellvoid, it's more of a playstyle difference than like a certain cards that I'm bringing in and out. Something that Kindle specifically does versus Spellvoid is actually trade 1 for 1 on a Spellvoid 1, um, getting it through, right? They're usually trying to use the Spellvoid to make sure that Aether Wildfire is going to get 1 to 2 points down, depending on how much Spellvoid, like 2 to 4 if they have the Spellvoid 2 or Spellvoid 1, right? And Kindle trades, 1 card for a spell void, so it gets over like that. But a lot of the time with the spell void characters depends on specifically, the rest of their AB. Are they playing AB1 with spell void? Are they playing AB2 with spell void? Or are they playing AB3 with spell void? And if they're playing AB3 with spell void, you're really just trying to get all the cards out of their hand on your turn, and then they try to play something on their turn, and then even with the spell void you can try to get over after you've chipped them enough. But if they're just playing AB1, you're actually more trying to play on your own turn than trying to combo them on their turn. If they're playing a lot of spell void and less AB. If they only have AB1, cards like Aether Flare and Aether Spindle are actually the power plays in your deck. What Aether Flare allows you to do is, if you keep a 3 card hand, 2 blues, and that Aether Flare, is that you can actually Kano in your own turn to be able to hit a spell off the top of your library, and then come in with Aether Flare, and then they only have AB1, so Aether Flare is going to hit for 2 or 3 damage, and then buff your next spell for the amount of damage it does, so 2 or 3. So it's a one-time wildfire, basically, on your own turn. And so you can do these upwards of 9 to 10 damage on your own turn to get your opponent down. So even if they have spell void and you come in for a wildfire with 6, and they spell void, 2 to 4 of it, they will still die throughout the damage because you've done so much damage on your own turn. But it gets really tricky if they have AB3 and like say Spellvoid 2 or Spellvoid 4, because you do have to double or triple spell in your own turn, and not hope that they tap out on their own turn, or they don't have a lot of pitch value left in their hand, plus the spell void to take a significant amount of damage to either die or get them close to dying on your own turn and other spells.
All right, and what about the one matchup that I was referring to earlier was Assassin? I think it's very interesting because you have the disruption aspect, right? You're a combo deck that's trying to achieve something, but you're facing a deck that typically has a lot of blue cards, specifically talking about new, and usually has AB to back it up, and also has every form of disruption you can imagine: hand disruption, arsenal. There's not really anywhere that's safe unless you actively play your cards out. So, what is some of the strategies or ways to kind of help newer players starting out in that matchup specifically?
Yeah, the matchup is a matchup that we stack into, right? That's like the high level of it. It's just going to be our stacking plan. Those 52 main board cards plus all those D reacts in the sideboard. But stacking is pretty difficult. So if you don't know how to stack, I just try to play that game, a lot slower than you would another game. Just treat it as like a high AB kind of a matchup to where you need to chip down, you need to be able to block with specific threats. You need to block specific threats so you don't get blown out or your arsenal, they get to take your arsenal for free or other stuff like that. You really need to trade cards and try to get through there. But that is going to be the matchup we're primarily trying to stack in this meta as well. It's the most common deck that is honestly the only reason why we have the stacking package in this meta specifically is because of new and Azuri as well. And it's because they don't actually do a significant amount of damage to you, but they have a lot of on-hit effects. So they try to interact with your arsenal, and you can get around that by, I'm going to pitch all my cards to the bottom and be able to, or block with all my cards instead, and trying to set up this very specific turn cycle as well. That allows you to do a couple of things. Because you're playing slow and they don't do a lot of damage, you can block all of them out and then set up that big, huge combo at the end that they can't really interact with unless they hit you with a bonds and shuffle your deck, which you then have to restack your entire deck, which can be extremely annoying as well. And they kind of banish cards off the top of your library sometimes with specific cards if they hit. So you have to min max trying to see if you want to get that blind flip off the top because sometimes it's your Aether Wildfire and you need that to be on the bottom of your deck. So it is a tricky matchup, but is the one matchup that you're specifically trying to stack and trying to get to that late game to overwhelm them on the same turn.
Absolutely. So let's kind of pivot to the other side of the table, right? We have people that are wanting to learn Kano, but we also have people that are just trying to learn more about the hero, not necessarily in an effort to learn it or play it, but to beat it. What, as a Kano player, are some things that you really do not like seeing? What are really good strategies to kind of combat what you're actively trying to do?
Yeah, main thing to come back Kano is just the card Oasis Respite. It is directly printed to hose Kano. If Kano is ever a problem, it is the card specifically to try to keep it down and keep it in check, right? But also things that I see is respecting Kano or not respecting Kano with the amount of AB that you play, or maybe the sideboard cards like Oasis that you play as well. But the main things that I see a lot of people do against Kano that they really shouldn't do is just kind of throwing their four card hand every single turn and just trying to, which they do in every other matchup, of trying to maximize your hand quality, right? So if you look at your hand and it's like, oh, it's 16 point of value, let me try to get all 16 point of value. Sometimes you can't do that against Kano because if you play all four cards on your turn, you can die. They can play on your turn and you can die like that, right? So it's a lot of the time being able to try to keep the extra blue card in your hand, or if you have like two floating, not playing that last card in your hand and actually just going to Arsenal and trying to play a little bit slower, not opening yourself up to getting comboed out of nowhere because, I tapped out. I have zero resources, only one resource floating, and I've played my entire hand, and my Kano opponent hasn't blocked a single thing. A lot of the time, if Kano is not blocking anything on your side and takes upwards of, 6 to 7 damage, and you have the last card in your hand, maybe not play that card because they're waiting for you to fully tap out, or they're doing the numbers in their head and they're like, well, I can beat a red, but if they keep that card, I might not be able to go for it. and let's see what my opponent does. If they play that card, then I know they don't have any cards to be able to pitch to a combo, and they die for sure. So trying to keep the Kano guessing and making them bet that you have a red card instead of a blue card because of the amount of damage they need to do is, and also not playing too aggressively when you don't need to, when you can just play a little bit slower and then get them the following turn as well.
Right. That's actually a great way to put it. Just every card that you see on the combat chain, defensively from Kano, you kind of push on the gas a little bit more because that's less resources and card equity that they have in their hands. So if they do try to pop off or do something, it'll be minimalized because they've already established cards to the combat chain on the defense. So
Yeah,
great way to put
usually
that.
the combo takes upwards of like 9 to 12 resources minimum to like try to do that. And if your opponent blocks with even one card and you don't have, and they don't have, epots out, they actually, it is extremely hard to combo you unless they hit a tome to get those resources. So if your opponent, blocks with one or two cards as Kano, it's kind of gas is open to just kind of tap out on that turn. But if you come in with, five go again and you have one less card in your hand and they just take the full five and have four cards in your hand, maybe think twice before you come in with that last card in your hand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to kind of close this out, I could just have a couple fun questions, right? How many times have you said, "If only I had one more resource"?
A million, a million. I That is one of the things that if you ever have one of those prolific Kano people in your area, they will always say usually one resource, one damage throughout the game or anything like that actually causes the game to go one way or the other, specifically for Kano as well. If I've always had, if every single game that I've lost, if I had one more resource on one turn or throughout the game, I would say that I would win significantly more games as well
Right.
because it's just such a finite resource, especially in Kano, because you do so much amplifical damage and it, your Kano ability costs three, costs a whole card to be able to use to see the card off the top of your library, right? So the more resources you have in Kano, the better it is.
And there's also a little bit of a stereotype in regards to Kano players, and that's how astronomically well you guys do at limited. And by astronomically well, I mean absolutely awful.
Well,
So is that just a statistical anomaly or is there actually something does Kano operate on such a far axis that all that time invested in the hero maybe doesn't translate to a lot of things in like the realm of limited flesh and blood that you actually do pay an opportunity cost there?
So I'll come at this in multiple, like there's three things that I want to say here. First thing I'll say
Sure.
is Keno does play so significantly different than the rest of the game. And everybody can agree with that, that Kano is not, doesn't do the exact same thing as every other deck does. Like Kano and like Guardian are like so far away from each other on like the possibilities of what you can do and like how turn cycle works that yes, when you get to, limited, which is usually the, shortened and you're all kind of on the same power level and it's like kind of the basics of fab because Kano players, don't not necessarily play the same game in Flesh and Blood, but they lose a lot of that, turn cycle equity because you're trying to take two turns a lot of the time on like the last turn of the game, playing towards that. So they do lose some equity. I won't lie. You do lose a lot of equity in limited, I would say, with Kano. The second point I'll get to is that I do think it was a statistical anomaly for a very long time that the the five Kato players that you would hear all the time were just actually atrocious that draft. Like, not to throw my boy Caleb under the bus, but I've spent the last 2 years trying to teach this man how to play limited correctly and value cards correctly in this game. And he's finally got it. He actually 5-1 at US Nationals and 4-2 to his draft at the
There you
last
go.
Pro Tour, which I'll say. Third thing is I got to defend myself. I was top 10 limited elo and limited for the majority of this
Hey,
game, and
hey.
so there is some of us that can actually draft in Kano.
Sure.
But it is really funny because for a year that was a pretty proficient meme because Julian, my boy, I remember at PTLA, he was 4-0, 4-0'd CC with Kano. And I remember walking up to him and he said, I think I'm going to drop. And I was like, what do you mean? You're 4-0. And he's like, I literally can't draft. And I was like, and me and Caleb were sitting there talking to him and we're like, there's no way you're this bad at draft. And I remember looking to the left because Vero was yelling at us and he was like, no, I'm his local. He actually cannot draft. And
Holy
then I
cow.
watched a 4-0 guy go 0-3 in draft, and then we convinced him to play day 2 of the Pro Tour, and he 0-3s his draft again, and then 4-0s the constructed version. So he went 8-0 in constructed with Kano, but 0-6 in draft.
Oh,
And
oh no.
Julian actually 1-2'd his draft at the last US Nationals, and we almost threw a party that he won a game of limited. It was that
I
bad. But
I mean, I can't say anything because we were doing one of those runaway drafts, and Julian was in my pod, and he actually
Mhm.
beat me. So in an MST draft. So
That's his one win right there.
no shade. I can't say anything because he beat me, right? So, but I
I
just
do
thought
love the
that that
meme
was
though.
funny. Oh
I
yeah,
do love the
it's
meme though. It's
hilarious. It's
great.
hilarious. Um, so I hope that the A to Z episode kind of gave everybody a good foundation on the hero. However, Peter, let's say that this hero just does it for somebody. Where can they go if they really want to take that deep dive?
If they really want to take that deep dive, something that actually came out today, the day that we were recording this, my good teammate and good friend Caleb or Majin Bay actually came out with a master guide of on his Patreon. If you want to pay for his Patreon, it does a lot. He puts a lot of effort into it, and actually wrote an above 30-page Google document
Wow.
on all of Kano. And he even told me he did not have enough time to write. He probably could write another 30 pages, which he's probably going to come out with a part 2. But it
Mhm.
is 30 pages of incredible, incredible decision making, knowing the deck, master class of the deck, and a lot of different styles of the deck during this time of old, and really just trying to do the deep dive on Kano that he deserves. That was actually something that we did not see a lot of people get into. I had said to Caleb maybe last year that if you asked me how many Kano players would be in an event, I would say less than, the number of fingers I have in my hand. And now it's almost upwards of 15, 16 players, which is kind
Mhm.
of laughable. But like going to an event, a major event, and thinking, oh, there might be 3, 4 Kano players to 16 in 1 year, like it is a lot more. And I would say trying to deep dive into these classes that, not a lot of people have for a very long time is something that you should try out. And I think his guide, I've read it, I've proofread it. It is extremely good. And if anybody wants to deep dive on the class or just learn more about the class and play against it, I would definitely go to his Patreon and read his article that is came out today.
Absolutely. And where can people find you? What are you doing? I know you have a YouTube channel that you do some, but like VOD reviews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter and on YouTube at MaskofMomentum, the ninja card. I'm a Kano player, but I'm named after a ninja card at MaskofMomentum. I post some funny memes on Twitter and also just go over some generic thoughts of the game of Flesh and Blood and other games as well that I play and just my life in general. And then you could also find me on YouTube at MaskofMomentum as well, and I do a lot of VOD review of top 8 games, as well as doing limited analysis, set review and stuff like that. The tier list videos, the common YouTube stuff, but definitely a lot of just trying to give a pro player or like a high level analysis of these top 8 games, because sometimes you watch coverage and they're talking about it and you're like, oh, this game is cool and it's going back and forth, but why are these players making the play that they do? Why are they going to do that stuff? That's something that I try to break down a little bit further. Like, because of these cards, this is the play that they're going to make, and why this play is good. That's something that I like to go over the top 8s on my channel as well. So if you are interested in that type of stuff, to becoming a better player as well, definitely check out my YouTube channel and my Twitter if you want to learn how to meme like I do.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you so much, Peter, for joining me. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. Thank you for the abundance of knowledge on this hero specifically. And I wish
Thank you for
everybody
having
a
me.
good night. Thank you so much. And I wish everybody the best. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.